Cavers, I've got questions. Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and today I am going to be following an Artful tutorial. Honestly, I didn't think this would be the kind of video that you all wanted to see, but so many of you said in the comments under the unboxing that you would like me to do a tutorial from the magazine, so I'm just really curious, what is it that interests you about that? Because I thought that would be really boring content. I do have a plan to do another video with this box and paint something of my own using your suggestions again that you left under the unboxing. So I had a peruse of the magazine again and I thought it might be nice to try out the pastel parakeets. I thought that would be nice and fun, and we've got a little bit of room for manoeuvre in terms of what colours we're going to put in as well, so that sounds like good fun too. I did get in touch with Artful after the unboxing video and the paints do indeed have lightfast ratings. I'm going to put the chart up on the screen for you now so that you can see. For those of you that have received the box or subscribed to it, we did get an email after to let us know about this masking fluid. It has latex in it, and that's more for an allergy warning. I'm actually sensitive to latex, but obviously I didn't have it on my fingers for any length of time, you know, just because you wash your hands and everything afterwards. But if you do have a latex sensitivity like me, which isn't fun by the way, especially when your dentist wears latex gloves, I'll leave the rest of that to your imagination. It was really something that should have been included in the magazine and unfortunately they didn't, so hopefully nobody's had any crazy reactions to it. Another thing that was talked about as well that I'm not really supposed to tell you, is that there may or may not be a development for a more storage for the watercolour pans. They did do a bonus upgrade where you can buy the extra colours. And my offhand comment was that I didn't want them because they've given us this beautiful tin, but if we buy the upgrade I'm going to have to put the pans in a separate tin, so that is something that is being looked at as well. So if you're a bit weird like me and you know you're very sort of control freakish and organised, Artful are looking into addressing that. So that's quite exciting. It would be even more exciting if they gave us a bigger palette in an equally beautiful colour that wasn't turquoise, but that's just me. In this tin now, I've taken off the bottom mixing palette flap. They drive me absolutely bananas in these palettes. I don't use them, I don't like using them, and I find that the lid actually closes better without them, especially if you've got a thick bit of watercolour paper stuck in here. It's been a while since I've followed a tutorial, so this is going to be quite interesting, I feel. I'll pop the magazine off to the side. If there's when I'm actually talking about the steps in the tutorial I will show you, just so that you know where I am in the proceedings. Now the thing I like about this tutorial as well is it wasn't specifically designed for the magazine. It was taken from Colourway's Watercolour Animals by Shauna Russell. So again, I just feel like that's a little bit more challenging, knowing that it's not been done specifically for the items that we've got in front of us. Okay, it goes straight into the painting. It doesn't actually say anything about the sketching stage, so we're off to a good start. Okay, so I think we're going to have to just, wing it. Get it. So let's get a little perch on the go here. So we don't want this to be completely straight because that would be boring. Now foot here. You know what's going to happen, don't you? These are going to end up really fat birds because I've got a thing about podgy birds. I like them. The nice thing about birds, especially like this, is they're really simple shapes to sketch out. So even if your drawing skills aren't absolutely fabulous, because the paint's doing most of the work, as long as you've got the proportions right, you don't really need to worry too much. Again, we can play about with this a bit. We can give them slightly bigger eyes or slightly smaller eyes, depending on what sort of idea you're going for. If you give them bigger eyes, you know, they get that sort of cute look about them. So then we just want really soft lines to indicate roughly where the colour changes are going to be. So this is just like a signpost for us when we start painting. The thing I find interesting about this is especially around the toes, if I just show you here, that there's some really dark heavy lines in between these toes, and it's not really something I would associate with watercolour, and it's obviously been done to help bring out the contrast, and that, you know, you guys know that's something I'm always banging on about, but this is to bring out the contrast between the wood and the toes so that the feet really stand out against the wood there, which I find quite interesting. Obviously it depends on the style of the artist as to what they do, you know, there's no hard and fast rules with stuff like this. Okay, so now we can get on to the actual steps in the tutorial. Got my little Derwent water spritzer here, and I'm just going to give my palette a quick scoosh. So step 1 says, start by painting the perch, even though the wood might be considered simply brown. I mix burnt sienna loosely with yellow and go back in while it's still wet to add some splotches of red and black for shading. This does not have to be exact. Okay. So for mixing, I say this almost every time I paint, I use one of these little Faber-Castell, I think they're actually craft brushes, but they're angled brushes, and this is just to save my good brushes in inverted commas. And I used to have a yellow handled one, and I've relegated that for craft purposes now because that's had Mod Podge and all sorts on it. So I find this good for, these brushes good for mixing, and it means you don't have to keep cleaning your brushes you're actually painting with. So we're going to grab some of the burnt sienna. Now, not very specific about the type of yellow. It looks, just from what's in here, it's more of a cool yellow, so I would use the lemon yellow for that. Now there's no indication of brush sizes or anything like that as well. For an area of this size, I would say, well, the thing is as well, with the Artful brushes, they've got a really pointy point on them, so in terms of being able to get into smaller spaces, it's not such a big issue. So we're going to go with, we'll go with this number 4 round. We'll do this a little section at a time, I think. That might be a good idea. So we want to keep that quite loose. Do its thing. So this is like a wet and wet technique. See, this is fairly straightforward. There's not a huge amount to this. So at this point, while this is, I can see that this is still a little bit wet, the first bit that I've done. So I may pop in, I'm not going to go for red, I'm going to pick up some of the Umber. And I'm just going to take that straight off the palette. Because what we've got to remember is that this set of paints, you know, they are very, very pigmented, they're very vibrant. And if we're doing something like wood, the red might be a little bit too enthusiastic maybe. I'll maybe let that dry a little bit more before I start plonking black in, because I don't want the black to spread too much and end up with a really mucky, muddy, you know, horrible concoction. And now the tiniest, but I'm always very wary of using black. There's obviously going to be more up in here because this area is going to be in shadow. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to put another layer of the burnt umber in as well because I feel it's quite washed out looking. But we can go back to that in a bit. And that is literally, in terms of the tutorial, this is what the branch is looking like after this first step. Which isn't anything like down here. Now there may be stuff in subsequent steps, but the end of the tutorial is literally here. So I'm not sure what else we're going to do. I might have jumped the gun a wee bit, but that's fine. So step 2, start with one of the birds, apply a light wash of clean water. While the area is still wet, add light washes of colour. You don't want the colour to be too concentrated, so keep your application light. You can always add more colour in layers later. Don't I say that a lot? Shauna has started with the blue on this bird here. So I think we'll go with this sea blue because that's a fun colour. And we'll try and keep this light as possible. So I'll just use the slightly bigger brush. This is the number 5. I don't know whether we're supposed to be doing the whole body here. It doesn't really say, but I'm going to wet all the areas that on the body of this left-hand bird. Let's call him Jonathan. Johnny the parakeet. I don't know about that. That's why we don't take it straight off the palette, guys. I keep telling you, you don't believe me. Not a painter. I'm literally just doing this from the actual drawing. Because when we come over the page here, I notice in the next picture here in step 3, when we're putting the yellow in, there's also like a line of purple here as well, which I don't think is mentioned. So the sort of purpley colour I have is this violet. Now that paper's starting to dry already. It is very, very warm. The areas around the face seems to be a little bit of a warmer yellow, so I'm going to go for the actual yellow. It's just called yellow, but obviously that means actual yellow. And again, this seems very vibrant, which concerns me slightly for trying to get delicate shades of things. Okay, let's go. So he's got this little bit round his around his face and his eye. There is a little bit of shape to it. I was kind of hoping the paint would travel more in the water. I've almost got like a puddle here in this part, and I'm having to kind of push it about, which is, I would say it's more down to the paper. While the paint is still, so we're into step 3 now, while the paint is still damp, you can add a little more colour to the darker or shaded areas of the parakeet. Let the paint dry before adding any more detail. Really now we need to get to this stage, which I don't think we're there yet. So I'm going to go back in now and get a little bit braver with our colours that we want, you know, when we want some darker areas. So, okay, so I want to start making this a little bit darker. I'll do this. This is still damp. Now what's interesting is when this is going down it looks quite greenish. When it actually dries it looks much more blue. It's almost as if the brush has still got a little bit of yellow in it, and I've got a paint puck in my little jar of water to clean my brush. Now in this face area it seems to be a very, very light wash of the blue. Okay, it says repeat these steps for the next parakeet. So we really are going from the pictures here rather than you know, the step-by-step information. Our other parakeet is purple with a little bit of pink in. And again, there seems to be, they've put detail in here already, and we're not really at that stage. So just based on, you know, on this first part, on this first side that I've done, I wouldn't say that this would be a great step-by-step tutorial for complete beginners. I would say this would definitely be a little bit more, you know, if you've done a little bit of watercolour painting, you'll probably get on a little bit better with this one. But again, this one, you've got to remember, this hasn't been designed specifically for Artful. This has been lifted from the artist's tutorial book. Okay, I'm a little bit scared with this violet, I'm not going to lie, because it is really, really bright. So let's try and, let's start down here. That's a safe place to start. And just with the remnants of what's in my brush, I'm going to bring that up into this area here. Because again, the paint that's on the head of this animal is very, very, very delicate. Okay, so we've got a little tiny delicate shade of pink, and I'm going to use the rose red for this. And again, very, very cautiously. Okay, I'm going to get a bit braver with this not lilac colour. Come on, Gem, violet colour. Just try and soften out some of those shapes on this side here, good grief. And we'll move on to the feet. Paint the feet of both birds using the wet on dry technique. Shade around the bird's toes to create depth on the perch. Right, we need to go back to the perch first before we do this and let it dry. It's still a little bit damp, but it's not bad. So I've still got this burnt sienna, and I just want to not cover the whole area. You know, I'm not going to go over the entire branch, but I just want to make this a bit less kind of wishy-washy looking. So of course, with me doing this way and not actually following the steps of the tutorial, I've painted myself into a corner now. I can't do anything else until this is dry, so I'm going to go get myself a cup of tea. Okay, so we're starting to dry a bit now, and I'm just observing the feet on the tutorial pictures, and this little dude's got purple feet and this little dude's got pink feet. So that's relatively straightforward. I think what we want to do is colour the feet first and then put the darker colour in once that dries, because if we put the shadow in first and we accidentally catch it with the lighter colour, then that black's going to bleed into the paler colours in the feet. So that kind of makes sense in my head. I don't know whether that's the right way around to do things, as again I keep telling you, I'm not a painter, so but that kind of makes more sense. So I'm going to grab the purple again. It's very sort of casual, loose lines. It's not there's not a lot of like crisp detail going on here, which I kind of like. I'll just put some more water. I'm going to switch to the smaller brush here. That's the 5. I could probably do with the. In fact, let's use the number 1. This is a bit softer as well. The other foot here, there seems to be lots of crazy colours going on there. There's some brown in there, and there seems to be quite a lot of blank, you know, just the paper being left. So we'll try and mimic it as much as possible. Now I have to say, I find this much more interesting than following a direct sort of, oh, you must put this line here and that line has to go there, because this gives you a little bit of artistic freedom as well. so that when you're following the tutorial, it's not like a carbon copy of what's in the tutorial. It is like your version, and I think that's quite important even when you are learning. You know, obviously if you're following a tutorial, you're wanting to learn, but it's quite nice to be able to kind of like do your own thing a little bit. Like, there's nothing to say that you have to follow tutorials to the letter anyway, but yeah, I like this idea. In terms of getting the shadow in here, I'm not going to use black. We have the brown in the Artful set, which when I talked about it in the unboxing, it's a very greyish brown. So in this instance, this is going to work in our favour. It's a bit less harsh. So over here we can start to, with this number 1 brush again, we can maybe start to just add a little bit in here. Now I'm really happy with using this brown. This is perfect. Keeping this quite concentrated as well. I've not put a lot of water in this. He's got like a little bit of a claw going on there, so I'm going to put that in with the brown as well. So really, even though we're following this tutorial, a lot of this is about observation of the actual photograph rather than the content of the tutorial, which to me again is a good thing, because I'm always banging on about how it's important to pay attention to the subject. Okay, happy with the feet for now. So we're going to come back up here and we're going to start putting in some detail. When the largest areas of the subjects are dry, you can start adding small details such as eyes and beaks. I always use a small dot or two of white in the eyes to give the impression of light reflection. This small detail makes the subject look alive. White watercolour, transparent. Ugh. So I'm going to add the white details in later with a white paint pen of some description. Just do a bit of augmenting here. Okay, so again, this is all about observation. So I'm looking now at these two pictures, especially this one close up, so that we can put in these details and make it look like it's supposed to look. So I'm going to grab some black now for their eyes. And I want this to be quite concentrated because we want this to obviously to stand out. Now this little dude's got his eyes shut. We don't have to worry too much here, but he's got some lines coming up round here. And then we can grab a little bit of this Sienna as well, just to do in this kind of corner area. Now his beak seems to be, it's almost like an indigo colour, like the base colour for this top part of the beak. So I'm going to try and mix a little bit of the Prussian blue. I'm just going to flip this round so that you can see where I'm mixing. I'm going to mix in this well here. So we've got some Prussian blue, and I would like to mix in a tiny spot of the Paynes grey. One of my favourite colours to use. There we go. Oh, that's pretty good actually. Ooh, go Gem. Woohoo, woohoo. Small victory. Again, just a little bit of water on my brush. I can test this out. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Okay, let's grab a little bit of this. And this little dude's beak area is like a darker version of that. So let's just pop that into. And interestingly, his beak is more of that kind of colour. So let's just bring that down. And then we've got this other dude's eye to go as well. So we're going to use neat black for this. Now I've always found that doing eyes, if you start from the middle, you can work your way out and change the shape and make it the size that you want to make it. Especially, again, like me, if you're not a particularly confident painter, this is a great way to do it because you're less likely to make a mistake. Now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking I like the shape, but I think it should be a little bit bigger. So I can just add another line, you know, just follow the shape round that I've done and just thicken that out a little bit. He's looking at his buddy like, man, I can't believe you're sleeping. Someone's trying to paint us here and you're asleep. There we go. I'm quite happy with that, so I'll let that one dry for now as well. And just while I've got this black on my brush, I'm going to outline this beak on this side. Now this seems to be quite a soft line. It's, you know, it's not been a solid, they've painted it in one brush stroke, so I'll just go over it with a damp brush. Soften out a little bit. Okay, so I want to plonk a darker blue here. I'm going to just grab some of the Cobalt blue. I'm going back to my size 4. Now this is purely observation at this point for the details on this little fella. There's a few areas where there's quite sort of distinct lines, and one of them is here. Now, this paper is still very slightly damp and I'm using that to my advantage here. Now interestingly, the purple seems to just have completely disappeared. which is interesting. That very faint purple that I'd put in at the beginning, in this finished part here, doesn't seem to be in existence. So I don't know. So one thing that I'm noticing just now, just as I'm going along and starting to add in detail, the shape of his head is wrong here. Now the best thing to do here is just for me to plonk a little bit of water down there and grab a little bit of my yellow. I'm going to start to puff him out a bit here. Okay, these nose areas look quite dry now as well, so again I'm going to go back in with my smaller brush and we're going to get some nostrils on the go. Now again, I think I'd rather use the brown for this just because we've got this particularly special shade of brown, and I think it's just going to look a little bit more natural and just a little bit less harsh. I'm going to come down onto the body here and grab some of this sort of indigo colour. I've got these tiny little lines around the eye, and I've found that I get one better if I just don't think about it too much. There you go, so you want really light pressure when you're doing that. Try and give this a bit more interest and a bit more depth on the body as well. So by varying the shades of blue that we're using, you know, you're not just looking at like a flat wash, and it's going to give a bit of depth to his chubby feathery little body here. So I'm quite happy with the way Johnny's looking. He looks a bit more parakeet-esque. What I do want to do is continue with this Prussian blue Paynes grey mix, you know, the kind of indigo colour I made. And I've just watered it down a wee tiny bit, and I'm going to use this on the feet. I just feel that the feet look really flat in comparison to some of the other areas of the painting now, and also I just want a little bit of shadow in there. Isn't he lovely? And I feel that he should be darker in here as well. Turned into quite a sort of shaggy, quite a shaggy parakeet, but it's fine, I'm at peace with it. And I feel as if the yellow is now a little bit washed out as well. So again, I've just got the mix here, I'm just going to kind of give it a jiggle about. And thinking again about texture, and I can start adding in, you know, that sort of more feathery texture, and it doesn't have, this is quite a loose painting in general, so you know, we don't want to kind of take away from that by making everything too precise. But it's amazing the difference in like one part of your brush stroke can make your painting look different. And I love this suggestion because normally I like to be quite precise, you know, especially for colour pencil, and it's quite nice to be able to just be a little bit more free. And so the fact that we've made him a little bit more kind of fluffy and puffy kind of, that appeals to me too. It definitely appeals to me. Okay, that's a bit better and I'm a bit happier. But again, because we've got the transparency of the watercolour, if you go back over areas, you know, a couple of times just with a, you know, another couple of random strokes, you're just building up depth. You're not actually going to ruin your painting, which is always a concern for me, always. And it just gives you that chance to, you know, make it look a bit more finished is probably the phrase I would use. Okay, we do need to pay a bit of attention to Billy now. I know he's sleeping, but he deserves a bit of attention. So I'm quite happy with the way Johnny's looking. The only thing I want to do next with him is to put the white in his eye, but his eye's actually not dry yet, and maybe put a couple of white flicky bits here and there just to, you know, to floof him up a bit. So we'll move over to Billy now. Now the thing that's getting to me here is I'm actually quite happy with the colours that we've used for Johnny, but Billy's looking a bit washed out. You can see there's quite kind of like rich, almost into like bluey purples, like violets. So I want to build up a little bit of that for him. And in order to do that, I've got a tiny squidge of the kind of random indigo colour that I mixed up. And what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to try and flood that with a bit of the violet and mix it together and see if we can get something close to what's going on in the tutorial picture. So grab a little bit. I've got some of this watered down violet, but I don't think that's going to cut the mustard somehow. Yeah, now there we go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That was a stroke of luck. Either that or my mixing skills are getting better. See if I just show you those side by side. That's not far off. Told you, Payne's great, everything great. I shut the door into the cave because Mr. Jem's been having a lie-in this morning. He's just got up and he's banging about in the kitchen. So I'd shut the door and Pip just like popped the door and just peeked her nose through it. And she was more or less asking, is it okay if I can come in? It's still very violet looking. I thought it was going to be a bit greyer than that. So not that lucky really. It's weird because it looks black in the palette now, even though I know that it's not. Okay, yes, that's more like it. And just as I did before over the other side, I'm just wanting to like soften this out a little bit. Right, I'm a little bit happier now with the shades that we've got going on here, which is good. So similar to the way we did with Johnny, we're just going to do with Billy now, and we're just going to work our way around and make him look a little bit more interesting. So he has got a lot of little lines that come out from his little sleepy eye here. And then he's got these ones that come down here as well. And I'm going to get a little bit more of the magenta on the go too. Sorry, rose and rose red, not magenta. That is the magenta. I've picked that up by accident. It's okay, we'll make it work. Now Billy does have quite a lot of blue in him as well. So I want to just start adding it in. It's got this little bit here as well, which is kind of just in there. Just add in a bit of shadow there so that we can see the curvature of his face. I've just noticed as well he's got a little bit of brown in his beak. So again, I'm going to go back to that very first colour we used down on our perch, which was the burnt sienna. Pop a little bit of that in there. I feel like his eye's kind of getting lost in here a little bit as well. I think maybe my closed eye line was a little bit too delicate. And I think I'm going to use the black for it. So I'm just going to go back over what's going on in here. Maybe extend that out a bit, you know, give him a bit more eyeliner. And make this line a little bit thicker. And then down here we can start to work on these sort of feather lines. So I've got some of this cobalt blue left from our friend over here. And I'm going to chuck a little bit of that in there. And then I can head back to this heady mix of lilac and... I keep saying lilac, of violet and Paynes grey, and then we can just start to work in. Billy seems to be a little bit more streamlined, obviously he's sleeping, so that kind of makes sense. He's not going to be as... I'd had to laugh, someone had posted under one of the last videos that what they were missing from their paintings when they were doing it was sound effects, and I am a firm advocate of sound effects for sure. Bob Ross used to use a sound effect as well on an odd occasion. So if it's good enough for Bob Ross, it's good enough for me. It does help though. I do think it does help because it helps you like kind of express. I feel like this is a bit stark in here, so I've just added some water to the colour that I was using. Now I'm going to lift some of this. I just wanted to get a nice even spread, and I've always got a rag here that I like to wipe my brushes on, and I'm just going to very lightly have a little dab at that. And then with a clean brush, again just the little number 1 round, just soften out this edge here, you know, where you can see the edge of my paintbrush marks, and literally just brush that out to almost nothing. There we go, and that's given me a nice soft edge, but there's just a little bit more colour in there. Which again, I don't really want to go overkill with this sort of muted down colour, so I'm going to grab the actual violet again, and we'll use that to sort of make his feet a little bit funkier. Now, okay, just for those finishing touches I was talking about, I tend to favour a white Posca pen, which is just paint and a marker. And I actually favour one that's almost at the end of its shelf life, because it's a little bit drier, you get a bit more of an interesting line. I call it my whisker pen because that's what I use it for when I'm drawing dogs. So we want to put a little highlight in Johnny's eye here. So that's literally just going to be a little dot. Maybe we'll have 2 dots just for fun. I've just realised as well, this section of his beak, I never finished that off. Consummate professional always. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of the Prussian blue. And as suggested in the tutorial, we're going to put in a couple of... Oh wow, what happened to that? Picked up a little bit of the black paint there. So we're going to kind of pop a few lines in here. Now this will pick up some of the colour of the paint unless it's absolutely bone dry, but I wanted to show you what I'm doing, and it is literally just wherever you see fit, a couple of lines here and there, maybe in there as well. It's so subtle. My friend over here again on these darker areas, So simple, and I find I like the control that you get with a marker as well. Okay guys, I think we'll call this little tutorial done. I can see them side by side. So granted, I did do a lot of this by eye and used this reference picture. The steps were pretty sparse, which for me is absolutely fine. As I said earlier, for somebody that's maybe not as used to playing about with watercolours, that might be a bit more challenging. But I did want to try something like this just for myself, because as you all know, I don't consider myself, especially with watercolour, I'm not proficient in watercolour. So this has actually been a really good exercise for me, as well as something for you guys to watch too. So thank you for your suggestions. I've actually really enjoyed myself with this, and I would like to think that I've produced a reasonable painting here that could be considered a painting. I think I'm going to sign this here. So I've also learned today as well that in these in the Artful set, my favourite colour combination is now that of the violet with the Paynes grey. That gives a lovely, lovely colour, so I'm quite pleased that I've explored that too. I would love to know your thoughts on the tutorial, and if you've tried one of the tutorials in the magazine already, I would love to hear that as well. And if you want to share your results of that with me, you can tag me on Instagram, but also tag Artful as well, because they love seeing it when people have tried everything out that's come in the box. That gives them a really good indication as well that you like what's in the box, and it means you might get more of the same. So I just want to thank you very much for watching today, and I'll see you back in the cave on Sunday for another video. So have a good day everyone, please stay safe, take care of each other, bye bye for now.